welcome to our interview with Insights with an Expert. We have McQaid with us today. Hello, Michelle.
Hi there.
It's lovely to have you here, and thank you for saying yes to our Kids in Harmony parenting community.
Oh, thank you for asking me.
Oh, thank you. Before we get started, your qualifications are amazing. Your footprint on the earth already is something I just feel really honoured to have you here with us. I noticed to have someone like the founder of positive psychology call you a world leader in workplace intervention for positive psychology is truly commendable, and obviously for me it shows your passion and commitment to that area of your life and to making transformational change in the world. So can you share a little bit about your background with our community, please?
Sure. Look, I've had a very blessed journey, I have to say. I spent most of my life after graduating from university in the world of PR and marketing and branding, and working for pretty big companies like IBM and the accounting firm PricewaterhouseCoopers all over the world, here in Australia and in London and New York. And it was a great gig for a long time. It took me lots of interesting places, doing lots of interesting work. But increasingly I became curious in those organisations about how did I keep bringing out the best in myself, in the teams I was leading, and in the organisation as a whole. Particularly by the time I was finishing there, I had a global role. So I was looking across 60 different countries, about 150,000 people. How did we help them actually perform at their best most days?
Yeah.
And I think I was at a stage of life myself where I felt like I kind of achieved everything I'd ever dreamed of. I had my dream job, I was living in New York, which was my dream city to be in, a beautiful family, good health and friends, money to meet all my basic needs. But I increasingly found that I was functioning but not flourishing.
Yeah.
It was kind of getting harder and harder to get out of bed each day and pull it all off. And so those two elements, kind of how did I help people at work be their best, and more importantly at home, how did I be my best so I could keep doing what I was doing, really came together in a bit of a collision point about there has to be a better way to do what I was doing and what I could see other people were doing around me as well. At the time, positive psychology was getting a lot of media attention in New York because it was the first time there was a course on campus at Harvard University that was more popular than economics.
Wow.
Ever in the history of Harvard, first time.
Fantastic.
So, and it was because there was a professor teaching a course in positive psychology. I was like, what is this? And that there was a science of human flourishing kind of completely intrigued me. I'd never thought that maybe there was a science behind, how we could be happy, how could we have well-being. So that really set me off to go and do my studies with Marty Seligman, who is often talked about as the founder of the field, which was an amazing experience. I did my Masters of Applied Positive Psychology at the University of Pennsylvania with him. And I was really lucky because the organisation I was in at the time was really curious about, did any of those ideas actually work in a business environment? So as I was going to class, I get to come back and apply it all straight away to see if any of it made a difference. And of course, I was constantly experimenting on myself my whole time and my family to see what it did in our lives. And that really started a whole shift for me into this space of understanding how do we bring out the best in ourselves and others each day, be that at work or be it at home.
Oh, that is a beautiful story. So so how did you come, this is our mindset pillar, so how from that experience and all your studies in positive psychology and what you've done, where did you get your little love for mindset? I've listened to your Michelle McQaid TV, which I love and I can highly recommend. They're just fantastic. And where did your love for mind, I mean, to me they seem to all fit together. You sort of can't do one without the other. Where did that little love come from, and who's been your major influence with mindset?
Yeah, look, I had a real aha moment sitting in class one day during that master's program when we were first introduced to the work on mindsets. And mindsets are just beliefs that we hold, and that tend to colour a lot of the way that we see the world, the way that we feel, and probably most importantly, the way that we act. And my aha moment came through the work of Professor Carol Dweck, who is at Stanford University and a psychologist there. And she discovered that people tend to fall into one of two mindsets. A fixed mindset, where we kind of believe that we come into the world pretty much as good as we get, that things like our intelligence and talent don't really change significantly throughout our lives. You either kind of have it or you don't. But she also found that some people have what she calls a growth mindset, where they have this belief that our talents and our intelligence are always capable of improving. A lot of us are kind of a little bit in between those two, and you might be a bit more one way or the other in different areas of your life as well. What my aha moment was as she described this kind of fixed mindset, and people with a fixed mindset, because we don't believe that effort really makes a lot of difference, we tend to be much more focused on the outcomes we're achieving as the way that we judge ourselves and we judge other people as well. One of the challenges of that is if you don't feel you can hugely improve on what you're doing, you tend to want to control things around you a little bit more in order to ensure you can get the desired outcomes you want. Often people in a fixed mindset have that little voice chattering away inside their heads going, you're not really good enough, someone's going to find out any moment that you're an imposter. Getting negative feedback when you're in that kind of mindset, kind of like wounds in the heart, like just cuts you to your core, because you don't really feel like there's a lot you could do to get better, to improve on the feedback that you're getting. And as these things were kind of described, I was sitting there just going, oh my God, this is how I've been living so much of my life. And it's very common, particularly in more Western countries, because our schooling system and then our organisations tend to make us very focused on outcomes. If you think about school, it's often very much about the grades we achieve. Then we go into workplaces, we often get graded there as well, which determines promotion and bonus and all those kind of things. So it really cultivates this kind of very outcome-focused mindset. And for me, I think that was that feeling I was functioning, not flourishing. I was kind of like that duck gliding along the pond, and underneath, on top, I looked all kind of calm and serene, but underneath, I felt like I was paddling for my life. And that was creating a lot of anxiety and stress about whether I could keep pulling off the next thing and the next thing. Could I live up to the expectations that I created for myself and that I felt others had of me? So that was where my real aha moment came with mindsets. And when I discovered there were things you could do to shift them, I was like, oh my God, do I need some of that?
Oh, wow. That's fantastic. So when you say there are things you can do to shift them, can you share what you think or your thoughts on what a parenting mindset, why a parenting mindset is important? Like for me, I value mindset. It's one of the pillars of the program. But from your perspective, what would you consider why it's important to be aware of your parenting mindset?
Yeah, well, those fixed and growth mindsets show up as much in us as parents as in any other domain of life, right? We either kind of believe we're great parents and we've got it all figured out, or we don't. And when we don't really feel like there's a lot we can do to improve upon that, again, we get that kind of little chattering voice inside our heads of, you're really kind of messing this up, what kind of damage are you going to do to this kid? Why can't you parent like the person next door or the other school mum across the playground does? All that kind of beating ourselves up that we tend to do. I think particularly as mothers, probably a little bit more than we see fathers do, but it can definitely go both ways. So those same beliefs of fixed and growth mindset come out in parenting. So if we were fixed mindset as parents, we tend to believe we either had a talent for parenting or we didn't have as much talent as we might wanted. And as a result of that, again, it tends to make us more controlling. We tend to feel the wounds much more when our children tell us how we're letting them down. Or we forget to pack the lunch, or the school lunch order doesn't arrive arrive, or we don't make it to the class play on time, or we're missing sports day because we have to work. All those moments where we're beating ourselves up, all examples of fixed mindset in action, right? Whereas when we're in a growth mindset as parents, we're a bit more graceful and kind to ourselves. So we might still forget to get the lunch order in on the right day, but instead of beating ourselves up about it, we go, you know what? I'm human. I now know I need to pay more attention to the lunch order system, and I'll get it right next time. Right? So there's a little bit more permission and grace for learning and improvement when we're in that growth mindset, because we believe that with effort we can get better. And therefore, when we fail, it doesn't feel as fatal. When our kids tell us how we're letting them down, it doesn't feel like we can't come back from that and keep doing better.
That is so beautiful. I love the words you're using there, that we give ourselves permission and grace. And that sort of gentleness and being aware of the growth mindset definitely helps us practice that.
And I think just knowing you can tap into that makes a big difference.
So when you say knowing you can tap into it, what can you share what you mean by that? So knowing that it's available. What's some practices or something you can share with us to tap into to be having that awareness, or to beam me up, Scotty, or whatever we need?
Well, the first really important thing is to know that neurologically, our ability to improve on our talents and our intelligence is an absolute biological fact. Okay, so not that long ago, we really thought that once we got to adults, we didn't really learn or change very much the rest of our lives. But over the past decade, as we've come to understand more about how our brains work, we now know that it's absolutely possible right throughout our lives to continue to improve on things like our intelligence and our talent and our skills in terms of parenting, okay? So the first really important thing to know is that change is possible in these areas. You're not doomed to always be the current parent that you are. Secondly, once we understand that, it's really important to start tuning in to the stories that little voice is chattering away to ourselves. So our brains are sense-making machines, and we like it when all the pieces of our puzzles fit together. And the best way we do that is by telling ourselves stories. And in particular, we'd like to tell ourselves stories about why something's happening and what might happen next. It's one of the ways we kind of manage the uncertainty in our world. And one of the things that happens in this little voice inside of our head is it tends to catastrophize and jump to conclusions a bit. So that little voice is chattering away saying things like, oh my goodness, you're such a failure, you're getting this so wrong, this child's going to be scarred for life, you're going to be paying for therapy, they're never going to leave home. They're all examples of that fixed mindset chattering away to you. So it's starting to tune in. This little voice is chattering for a reason. It's trying to help your brain make sense of what's happening and figure out what the consequences of that will be, so it can try and keep you safe. But if you just let it go unedited in terms of the stories that it's telling yourself, unfortunately, it tends to tell us the worst possible stories. And again, it does it to try and protect us. Now, what we've discovered is that although sometimes those stories might be absolutely accurate, most of the time they're not. Most of the time there'll be shades of grey to those stories that actually will start to change the way you feel and what you're willing to do on the other side. So the third thing, once you've started tuning into those stories, is to start asking the question, is that the only explanation for what's happening? And it's a really simple way to just challenge that story. Is that the only explanation for what's happening? Is the fact that I didn't send his lunch to school today mean that he's going to think I'm a terrible mother, the school thinks I'm a terrible mother, he's going to grow up malnourished because he's missed this important meal, and I'm forever going to be a bit of a screw-up as a parent that never gets it all together. Now, that may be one very feasible explanation, okay? But there are probably other stories in there, like, actually, today I was really flat out and I could have sworn I packed the lunch and it wasn't in his bag. It's still sitting on the bench. Or maybe actually I told him to put the lunch in his bag and he's left it on the bench. And really, if he misses this one meal, is it going to be the end of the world? And, probably one mother every day at school forgets to pack the kids' lunch. So I'm in plenty of good company. And any of those stories are probably equally feasible as to the original very fixed mind story I started with. But each of these stories make us feel a little bit better, and as a result, we're willing to do other things, So the fourth thing that we can do is to then take the growth mindset action. So once we've started to feel like actually we're not complete failures and doomed to disaster forever, there could be some light at the end of this tunnel, then how can we act differently to improve our efforts and get a better outcome in the future? And how can we keep investing down that kind of path rather than letting that little voice make us kind of want to curl away and hide from the world?
That's fantastic. So when we're practicing that as a parent and we're aware of that, what are we encouraging in our children?
Well, in the first instance, you're giving them an example of how not to catastrophize and jump to conclusions. So the more you can demonstrate a growth mindset in yourself, the better it is for your child as well. But the same absolutely runs true of your children. So anytime you hear your child coming back with that kind of failure, helplessness, hopeless kind of story, I'm no good at maths, I missed the basketball team, no one will play with me because I'm such a loser, all of those are teachable moments. And you can use the exact same approach with your kids. So number one, making sure they know that things like our intelligence and talent actually get built up with effort and practice. So wherever they're at today doesn't mean that's where they're doomed to be for the rest of their life.
Brilliant.
Secondly, helping them tune into the story you're hearing them tell. Hey, I can kind of hear you saying you're so hopeless because you can't figure out these maths problems. Let's just have a chat about that for a minute. So making them aware of that little voice in their head. And thirdly, asking them the same question. Is that the only explanation for what's here? Is the fact that you're hopeless the only reason you can't do this maths problem? Or actually, you know what, last week I saw you figure out some really interesting maths things, and so maybe sometimes you can figure it out, it's just this particular one that's not working. Or remember when you were learning to play basketball, at the start was so hard you couldn't even get the ball close to the ring, but look how well you're doing now and what you've been helping your team achieve the last few weeks. So helping kids understand that things like intelligence and talent don't mean that things always come easy to us, that it's actually effort and practice is how we build up that neural wiring to be able to improve and get better at things. And so just like you challenging your stories, as they start to challenge theirs, again, often those stories will help them feel a bit better and get them ready to do that fourth piece of taking a more growth mindset action. And I have a 9-year-old son. We started in this when he was about 5 years old. This poor kid's going to be in therapy for the rest of his life. But initially I kind of coach him through those sorts of steps. I've noticed more recently he can turn it around now without me interfering at all. So something happens now and he notices himself telling himself those stories. He's quite quick at starting to find the alternatives and then try and take the growth mindset action. So kids pick this up really quickly, but by modelling the process as parents ourselves, it makes it much easier for the kids to see what's possible.
That's brilliant. I love him. I don't know if it's one of your videos or one of your blogs. You talk about learning and effort is muscle building, or building the muscle. Yes, it's that practice. It's fantastic.
And it is, and I think that's a really easy way for kids to see, just like they're growing or that, our brain is a big, beautiful muscle, and it builds and grows the same way. Unfortunately, we're not often taught that that's how our brain works. I think it's one of the least understood parts of our body generally, and the more that kids can understand that, then the more reachable a lot of those things become. Because I think, when my son was first learning to play guitar and he started in prep, I think he thought he was just going to pick it up and be able to rock it out straight away. So the shock
Yeah.
that he had to learn like chords and it didn't sound like it did on the radio, it was
Yeah.
terrible. Like he came home, it's like, that's it, I'm quitting. It's terrible.
Gorgeous.
And so, you know, each time it's sort of going back through with him about, okay, well, this is how you master something. You know, we've learnt that mastery isn't a straight kind of line. Rather, mastery is this kind of curve where we start up almost on that perpendicular and you feel like you're hanging on by your fingertips at times.
Yeah.
And then you get to that tipping point, you come over the horizon and it flattens for a bit. Things kind of feel so easy and enjoyable, and then they almost get to the point of boring, which is our sign that we're ready to climb the next mastery curve. And so if kids learn that mastery in life looks like that, when we're going up that perpendicular, it's like, yeah, it feels hard. And it's hard for a reason, because you're literally wiring your brain to be able to form these behaviours. But the beauty of our brain is it will tip and it'll flatten out and you'll have that enjoyment for a while. And then when you're bored, it's a sign you're ready to climb again. And we're finding that this is a big part of building grit in kids, that perseverance and willingness to keep showing up to achieve what's important to us.
So when you mentioned the word grit, it's like a wonderful buzzword at the moment. Well, it has been for a little while.
Yeah.
Grit and mindset, are they like brother, sister, the same? Tell me, share your thoughts on that.
I think they're the same. It would be interesting talking to the two researchers, Angela Duckworth, who was one of my professors, and Carol Dweck, as to how interconnected they feel. I think Ange would say she sees some different mechanisms in grit.
Yeah.
And her latest research, which is very focused on kids and grit, is really looking around that and how to sort of trade off short-term gains for long-term benefits a bit more. So I see lots of similarities. I think it's hard to have a capacity for grit if you don't have a growth mindset.
Like a foundation.
It hasn't really been tested in their research yet, but I hope they do in the future.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah. I
have a list of questions here, and I want to make the most of it because I just love your work. So I'm just going to look down and have a look and see where we're at. We sort of touched on it a little bit, but I'll just ask, I love the is failure fatal? Now, in parenting, you have talked a little bit about it before, and how having a growth mindset can help bounce us back and see a different story or see something else. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, look, I think so often we grow up again with that fear of failure, that somehow it says something about us, we'll be less likeable, less lovable, less value to the people that we want to impress. But the reality is we all fail sometimes. And when we take our failures and kind of want to sweep them under the rug as though they haven't happened, hope nobody kind of notices, keep on moving, we actually miss some of our best learning opportunities. And so increasingly, again, in Carol Dweck's mindset work, we see schools starting to embrace failure more as part of learning. And whenever I see those moments with my kids, I always think, okay, this is my teaching moment. And whenever I have those moments myself, I take them out and show them to my kids and go, okay, this is a teaching moment. Mum fails as well. I often find myself on the thinking step next to a child for my behaviour. So failure really is just another way that we learn, provided that we've got that courage to actually look at what's going on. And I think as parents, you know, we often want to wrap our kids up in cotton wool. One of my friends, Dr. Adam Fraser, who I often teach with, he has this great slide picture of, like, you know, the slide that probably most of us grew up on in playgrounds. You know, in Australia, under the hot sun, it's pure metal. You know, you slide down and burn all the back of your legs. And this is how we taught kids to be tough, right? Whereas now he laughs like his daughters goes to the play gym and everything's wrapped and padded and soft landings. And he actually had a chat with Carol Dweck when she was out in Australia, saying, is this part of how, you know, we don't prepare kids to be a bit tougher, to take the knocks that life brings? She was like, yeah, absolutely. But one of the other things, of course, is, you know, some of the challenges we see around things things like Sports Day, where every kid now receives a ribbon no matter what their effort or their place. And look, those things are done with good intention, but what we've seen in places like California, where they had a movement for a good decade there about improving the self-esteem of every child, is that if we improve self-esteem, but it's not grounded in a reality of what a kid's actually capable of, we do far more damage in the long run than we do good.
Absolutely.
So rather than focusing on building self-esteem, what we want to focus and self-belief's a little bit different there, because there has to be an evidence base that actually I'm capable of doing this and therefore I can feel confident about it. So if you've got a kid at Sports Day and they're not winning the race and they might be quite devastated and disheartened about that, then again it's a teachable moment to have a conversation with them about, I know you're really disappointed, but you know what, those other kids who won, you know, they play sport more regularly. Perhaps they're in little athletics, perhaps they've just practiced more. But the good news is, if this is something you really want, if next year you really want to go out there and give it all that you've got, then there's absolutely things we can do about that. We can go out and practice, or we might start jogging together one morning a week or things like that, and build up your ability. And it's not a guarantee that you'll win the ribbon next year, but at least you'll know you've showed up and you've given it all that you can do, and that's all anyone can ask. So growth mindsets help us have more of those conversations with our kids again, where we can, one, be with them and feel the disappointment, don't write it off because it's very real for them, but two, also use it as a teaching moment about where effort makes a difference. So reframing those stories they might be telling themselves about, I'm a terrible runner, I'm no good at this, I always come last, and then, you know, helping them see what they can actually do about it if they want to change it. Equally, you know what, it's Sports Day, it's a day out of the classroom, you're just having fun with your mates. You know, is winning in this instance the most important thing, or maybe is the focus more just about, you know, having a bit of a laugh and some fun? It depends on the kid again, and what's important for that kid as to what would be the right approach out of those two.
That's fantastic. That sort of answered my question. A lot of the parenting or authors and things sort of encourage us to teach our children to fail. And I know they don't mean that literally, but to nurture opportunities for growth or teachable moments for like you were just sharing.
Yeah, and look, they're everywhere. Like, you'll find
them everywhere
with your kids. And now when they show up, I'm like, oh, it's okay, it's a teachable moment. Don't panic. We're all going to learn something.
Fantastic. How has, coming to a personal question now with your own parenting, so how has, and you shared a little before, but how has this whole journey for you, your positive psychology journey and who you are as a person and who you've become through this journey and mindset, how has it helped you in your parenting pleasures and enjoyment of parenting?
Look, it's because I feel I know more about how my child's brain works in order to help prepare him a bit better for the world. And unfortunately, our schools are still catching up on a lot of this, and you know, I think it's given me more confidence, but it's also given me more courage to be vulnerable and human with my kids, rather than feeling like I need to have it all figured out, or, you know, somehow something's wrong with me. So that's made a big difference. Look, you know, my poor kids, they get it all. So Charlie, my eldest, was 4.5 when I was doing my masters, so we drew all the 24 VA character strengths as like little Mr. Men characters around his wall, and each night when he'd go to sleep, we'd talk about which strengths did he use today, because I was trying to learn them as much as he was at that point. We definitely tune into the stories, as I've talked about. He is a bit more naturally hardwired to be a fixed mindset. I think we probably come from a long genetic line of fixed mindsets, so it's been really helpful in helping reframe that. And he is very good at mathematics. He loves mathematics. He dreams about numbers. But it's been really interesting watching him come home from school now in grade 4 and teachers identifying him as the kid that's good at maths. which
Yes.
again they're doing with good intention, but just completely creates fixed mindset in him that he doesn't ever want to look like he's not the kid that's good at maths, so he gets too scared to learn or to fail as he's learning mathematics. And so I find, there's a lot of rewinding I often have to do from some of the things that the school is unintentionally creating in him. What else do we use? We do a dinner table, what's working well, or what was the best bit of your day. And I have a 3-year-old boy as well, and he's very in charge of that process and asks us all.
Oh, that's gorgeous.
And I think it's a level of mindfulness that's just there a bit more in my parenting. And again, doesn't mean by any stretch I get it right. Just like every day isn't a perfectly happy day for me. What I found the difference that it's made both in parenting and in life is that when I spiral down because I'm feeling overwhelmed or I'm feeling anxious or stressed or fearful about something, rather than just continuing down to kind of helplessness, despair, languishing, I'm much better now at knowing, number one, I'm going down, and number two, at being able to figure out, is that downward process serving me well? Is that part of the learning in this moment? Or actually would I be better with a bit more broad and thinking space, a bit more growth mindset on, to try and find a way to move that back up into that sense of self-belief and confidence and towards flourishing. So, yesterday things just didn't go well yesterday. Nothing quite flowed. But I knew, over the last few hours of the day, I'm just not in the space I want to be. I didn't show up to parent the way I wanted to. I didn't show up to work the way I wanted to work. And instead of that lingering now for days or even weeks, which is where it would have used to have been when I described that kind of state in New York of functioning but not flourishing, now I'm able to go, okay, kind of got a little off track here. What do I need to do to get myself back into the space I want to be and be able to show up as the parent I want to be and the person that I want to be? So having the knowledge and the skills of things like mindsets has definitely changed that part of my parenting as well.
Oh, thank you. That's a beautiful story. I love how you shared you either have a choice between mindfulness. Is this where I need to feel or make space for, or do I want to choose another way of seeing it, or a growth mindset and have space for thinking? So that that is a really beautiful description of having choice in your parenting.
I think it's really important because somehow the spiral is a very healthy part of human functioning and growth. It's that kind of, fear of failure piece. And what I've learnt now is when I'm in that space, and actually it's a healthy part of my growth, I'm not scared anymore to let that unfold. Whereas I think I used to, before I learnt these skills, if I could feel myself going down, it was kind of like, oh my God, where's the bottom going to be and will I get myself back up? Whereas now I'm a bit more, okay, we're heading down, let's just see where this goes. As long as it's kind of a healthy part of learning, that's okay. I don't fear it, I think, in the same way that I used to, simply because I know I'll be able to get back up when the moment calls for it.
Do you think you shared just a few moments back about being able to be more vulnerable with your children? Do you think that allowing yourself that vulnerability helps in that, really, when you spiral? I too relate to the spiral. Very well. Do you think having that awareness of being okay with being vulnerable and drawing on your courage or whatever you need has helped with your mindset, or
Definitely, because I don't expect perfection. I think we were chatting before we started, and I said when Charla came along, we thought we were such great parents, had it all figured out, all this positive psychology stuff was working beautifully. And then when Jamie, our 3-year-old, came along, we realised Charlie was a great child, and we were really ordinary parents. And Jamie, bless him, has humbled us in every single way. He's been a great teacher.
Beautiful.
And I think, look, when I look at my kids and you look at the challenges that they go through, and particularly Charlie, as he's figuring school and friendships and all those sorts of things out, and what different emotions are and how they impact him, you want them to be able to navigate their way through that. You want them to be able to navigate through the lows and the highs that that every life has, and be able to feel, just like we were talking about with the spirals there, that they can find their way through to the other side. So part of that, again, is the role modelling of our own journey. And I said to Charlie this morning, because he was grump because he wanted to read his book and he was having to play his guitar and do his practice and that. And I said, look, last night Mummy was a bit grumpy at dinner and that, wasn't she? She's like, yeah. I said, well, I really wanted to be getting this piece of work done and I felt kind of torn. But you know what? I really missed out on spending good time with you last night and hearing how your day was, because I got my brain into a bit of a, funk. I said, and that's what's happening for you now. The reality is you need to practice your guitar. You can sit there and complain about it and wish you were reading your book, or you can enjoy the chance to play your guitar. And when that's done, you'll probably still have time to read your book later. So by being able to name and explain my own process, I can use that then as a teaching moment for Charlie about what he was going through himself the next morning. And I think there's a freedom in that just because I'm the parent, I don't have to have it all figured out. I remember being crushed as a teenager. I realised my parents didn't have all the answers and they'd been making it up as they went along. And it was a real kind of crisis of faith. It's like, well, if you don't know what's going on, who does?
That is so funny and so true.
And I think with Charlie and Jamie, Jamie dispelled him of any myth that I know what's going on.
Oh, that is gorgeous. I've had a thing with my son for years now. If I'm apologising or if something's happened, I say to him, I've never parented a 12-year-old before.
Love that.
I'm new at this, but I've been saying it since he was like 5. I've never parented a 5-year-old before. I'm so sorry. I'm new at this.
I love it. And I just think, again, there's that sense of permission and grace to say, you know what, I'm human, I'm figuring it out. I want what's best for you. I'm trying to show up and do my best. If it's not quite cutting it, I'm sorry, I'm still figuring it out. I'm going to try and get there. And the reality is they'll experience that themselves in all sorts of domains in their life. So I think if we can give ourselves that bit of permission and grace, it's a wonderful thing to model for our kids.
Such a good message for the interview too, the permission and grace. So I could talk with you forever. I've got one last question, if that's okay.
Go for it.
If you were to whisper into a new parent's ear or a parent's ear, what little parting wisdom or pearl would you give?
Look, I think, and it sounds corny, but it's just love them. At heart, we all have this deep psychological need to be respected, to be valued, and to be appreciated. And we long to be loved. And as parents, we're the safest place in the world to give our kids that love, right from the moment that they're with us. I read something the other day about, as parents, we often become that voice inside our inside our kids' heads. And if you think about the voice in your head, I know about the voice in mine, it's my mother. It's my mother. She gets my therapy bills now. But it was such that is so clear about what am I saying to my kids as a parent. Often in those busy moments where I'm juggling a lot of things and I'm not plugged into, turning up in the best possible way I can, what am I saying to them that they're going to carry in their heads, for years and years to come? So, I really just love them, and there's never a wasted moment to hug a child, kiss a child, whisper something good in their ears, because there will be so many things in life that don't give them those moments. So the more you can give to them, it's kind of that broaden and build theory of positive emotions. It builds them up, intellectually, psychologically, physically, socially, to know that they are lovable and to know that they are worthy of love.
Oh, that is so beautiful to finish off on. It's beautiful. So thank you for being here for us, for our whole community.
Thank you so much for having me. And I just hats off for what you're doing with the program. I think it's so needed, and I'm sure parents everywhere are benefiting from what you're doing. So thank you for putting it into the world.
Thank you, Michelle. Bye.
Bye.